Do I look happy to you? Am I a really happy camper right now? Or am I just putting on a face and make you believe that this is what happiness is? Well, maybe we'll find out in this episode where we talk about the World Happiness Report, apparently ranking the happiness levels of nations around the globe. So, are they the happiest? And did your country make it into the top 10? And what does that even mean? Let's find out.
Welcome to Two Chaps, Many Cultures.
In an increasingly globally connected world, it is vital to possess the essential skills of cultural intelligence.
Listen along as we present the topics, tips and strategies you can use to develop the power of cultural understanding in your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Christian Huffeler and Brett Parry.
Welcome back to a happy episode of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, or will it be? Yes, well, you'll make us happy if you subscribe to our channel, listen to our podcast, hit that bell, and welcome back to the show where too much culture is barely enough. And perhaps too much happiness is too much, or too much sadness. How do we work that out? Well, there are rankings, apparently. Tell us how happy people are. And where do we find those rankings, mate?
They are on a website. I think they're called the World Happiness Report, where nations compete in the Happiness Olympics, I guess. Where you can win
Olympics.
gold medals and bronze and silver medals or something. I don't want to make light of this. There is, and this is why we're talking about this, this is why we dedicate an episode to this, because it is heavily publicized around the world. The World Happiness Report makes it into news headlines. It is reported all over, at least in the media that Brett and I consume. And usually the highest ranking countries in that World Happiness Report are then looked at more vigorously. What is it about these lands that make people say they are happy? And this is where my thought process begins, or our thought process begins, and we wonder, how do you define this happiness, and is it the same in all these countries, and how do these countries end up on the top and others in midfield and others we don't want to talk about them? I don't know.
I find it, well, as Christian says, we are a little skeptical. Not skeptical, I guess we are intrigued by these rankings because we want to look behind the curtain a little bit. We want to understand what drives them, what is the modality of the questions and things like that. And perhaps we're not the only ones, because actually the people that the countries that ended up on top of this list, they seem to be the most skeptical. They're looking at that and going, oh, you're calling us the happiest in the world. Interesting. Well, we could tell you the reasons why perhaps we're contented, perhaps why we don't actually aspire to much more than what we've got, but happy? Yeah, I don't know. And maybe if you're a visitor, they point out, if you're a visitor to these lands, these Nordic lands, let's talk about these. Finland hit the top. Denmark hits the top usually, these countries that are in the far north of the globe. And if you go to these countries, if you walked around, probably you wouldn't see people dancing on the streets.
Probably not. No. And I think the geographic location is probably not a big factor in that either, because then if that were true, then maybe southern Argentina and Chile or Canada or Siberia would also rank highly, but they don't. It's Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden occupy the top 4 spots, and usually looking at the past years and how that happiness reports ranks them, they usually make up the top 5 somehow, the Nordic lands, right, or Nordic countries. No, they're not dancing happily in the street. And so what is it? What makes them happy? One of the articles that we both read about, or in response to the World Happiness Report and in response to the media craze about it, is that in recent years, at least in the Western world, mental health and work-life balance, took a lot of cues from Scandinavian living standards. The Danish concept of hygge became maybe a fad, maybe a flash in the pan. Who knows? It might just give clues to a more balanced life if that works out for the individual or within a certain region of the world where you live. But is hygge really the recipe for happiness around the world? Perhaps doubtful. How do you feel about that, Brett?
Interesting that they refer to this fervent embrace of hygge as a concept, and it became actually a marketing tool here in the US where we are, which is ostensibly strange. If we just put those in comparison with each other, Chris and I are both in the US, and this is a country that perhaps arguably doesn't have the best safety net for people. If you don't have a certain standard of living, healthcare is tied to work, your job, these kind of social structures that are so taken for granted in these countries. And yet in America, we have this almost fervent evangelical atmosphere where people it's like a marketing campaign every day. So they take a concept which is from another country, which seems to give them something they might aspire to, this sense of comfort and contentment, and then they plug it into a marketing campaign, and it becomes a commercial success. But in the article in Slate we're referencing, a lot of those things have now been pushed to the discount part of the stores. So but those concepts have been around for generations, centuries in those countries. They've never gone away in the countries that actually found them,
Right.
like in Sweden and Finland and Denmark and places like that. But here, it's flash in the pan, it's in, it's out, and it's on to the next best thing. And
often people make decisions on whether I want to accept an assignment, right? I work for a global organization. The company's offering me a posting abroad, and they're offering me a posting in the United States, or they're offering me a posting in, I don't know, France, Saudi Arabia, or in Denmark, Sweden, Finland. What am I going to choose? Which of these locations is most promising, for my career and also for my family and social life, right? And then if you compare Finland, Denmark, according to the World Happiness Report, against the US or Germany or, I don't know, France, then the scale easily tips towards the Nordics. Will that be the best decision for you and your loved ones? Well, no ranking in the world will have the right answer for that, right? Mm. And obviously, there are certain factors that contribute to the ranking. They look at income inequality or equality. They look at working hours, and they look at productivity levels in these countries, and they look at the educational system, how much social climbing is possible through education. All of these are factors that contribute to an overall happiness level in a society. But if you ask a Finn who lives, perhaps depending on their location, lives in darkness for several months throughout the year because the sun only comes up for maybe an hour or two during the winter times, will they tell you that they're particularly happy during those periods? Perhaps not. If you look at the levels of alcoholism and drug abuse in these parts of the world, suicide rates in Finland are comparatively high, then you would ask yourself, how does that factor into the number one ranking in the World Happiness Report? So with all these rankings, and we had an episode about a different type of ranking a couple of weeks ago, take it with a grain of salt. Make sure who's doing the data collection, how is the data collected, put together, and emphasized, because I don't know who said it first, but I think you shouldn't trust a statistic that you didn't falsify yourself. Right?
That's a good one. Culture is really what people are used to in a country. So, if you're interviewing people on a one-on-one basis, you're getting people's opinions. And we're not understanding those people and their happiness. We're just understanding what they're used to. Maybe perhaps they don't even have any perception of what it's like in a different country. And that's why, as Christian says, when you're contemplating moving to a new country, you're grasping at information, any information you can get. And this is a type of ranking you might find that comes up in your feed, especially if you happen to talk about it in earshot of your phone. But again, be very careful of it, because, it takes a lot more than that to understand what people are used to in a country and what makes them happy. Sure.
And as you pointed at, it's often the cultural values within a group of people that defines how the group looks at this phenomenon of happiness. I'm not an expert on Asian languages. I don't speak Mandarin or Korean or Japanese, but I've read more than once that in Mandarin or in Asian societies overall, there is no one terminology for that feeling of happiness. There are different words for different types of inner peace or elation or contentment or satisfaction or maybe even excitement. So that one English term that we use here, happy or happiness, doesn't easily translate into other thought concepts, right? So a ranking based on the definition is maybe a bit questionable given that background. And you look at the Nordics, whether it's Finland or Sweden or Denmark, what many of these Nordic cultures have in common is a cultural value of equality. In Sweden, they call it, and I think in Denmark, they call it Jantelagen, the law of Jante, a fictitious individual by the name of Jante. A Jante is the everyman, right? It's the law of the everyman. Everybody has access to the same resources. Everybody has the same rights, and nobody is better than anyone else. Don't you think you're special? Which I think in your homeland, Australia, they call it what?
Tall poppy syndrome. So
if you're a poppy that grows too tall, what happens to it?
You get your stem chopped off.
Ah, that must hurt.
That sounds painful. As I said it, that sounds painful.
So which maybe won't surprise us then that Australia also made it into the top 10 of the most happy countries, right? So maybe it is how cultural values teach us or lead us to manage our expectations. Right?
Absolutely.
If you look at US culture, where it is the proverbial country of unlimited resources and endless opportunity, you are raised in a mindset of, anything and everything is possible. Yes, you can become CEO one day. You might be president. Yes, the world is your oyster. You have what it takes. You're just a human being like me, and everything is possible for you. That is a magnificent way to motivate people to aspire, let them aspire to higher things. And when they don't reach that one big thing of maybe, let's say, the presidency of, there is only one at a time, so the chances are somewhat limited to reach that goal. How do you feel about it then? Are you still going to be happy, or will that lead to frustration because all your aspirational goals that have been held up to you, like the big carrot in front of your eager, hungry mouth, you'll never reach it? Will that make you happy? Will that make you disappointed? And then compare that to, let's say, Jantelagen, where nobody is supposed to have more than the neighbor, where it's socially accepted and expected that, we all have about the same and we're going to be all right with that. Right? Those are different ways to manage your expectations in life and the expectations of your emotional well-being. Does that affect the World Happiness Index? I would venture to say likely so.
Absolutely. And we want to know, are you happy if your country made it to the top? Is that a competition in and of itself? Does that make you happy if your country is at the top? Or if it's down at the bottom, do you you share some disappointment, or don't you care? We would love to know. We have an aspiration, and that is to hear from you. And so these scores, they are what they are, and the commentary, of course, we'll include the commentary in the description, the link to that commentary we're referring to. But we want to hear from you. What's your perception of happiness? How do you see your current state, or the current state of your country or society, or even the town you live in? I find that always interesting. But and is it an internal thing or an external thing? That's the very...
Are you responsible for the emotion, or is the world around you responsible for that emotion? That'd be interesting to hear.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, that's it. That's all we've got to do. We're asking you a question. Of course, we're leaving you hanging. And we're going to hope that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, listen to the podcast wherever you may be if you can't see us. And usually that's a good thing. Subscribe. And, I don't know. What are you going to be doing this week, mate, that's going to make you happy?
You mean people are happy when they don't have to see us? All right. Okay.
Well, that might be the thing. Yeah, maybe the Nordic countries don't get this show. Maybe that's what makes them happy.
Well, I'll force subscribe some of them. All right.
That's right.
So I hope this episode made you a bit happier, or make you think about your own level of happiness, or whether you want to give it the same level of attention as the news media or the social media have given it. So give it a think. Let us know in the comments. Subscribe, comment, and email us,
and share it with your friends.
Make them happy.
Make them happy. We won't let you down.
Right. Yet another episode, Two Chaps, Many Cultures. This guy's Brett. My name's Christian. I hope we see you next episode. Stay happy.